Good evening, friends. The sun is set, and I'm back with another tale from my collection. Now it's time to grab a snack, dim the lights, and let me take you into the night with a story I call Doctor's Visit. Good evening, Doc. Antoine pushed past into the room when the door opened. Thanks for agreeing to see me so late. I know we're past business hours. Quite all right, Mr. Krevsky, the doctor responded. Antoine set his bag on the floor next to a small table at a side wall with two chairs. He took one of the seats and indicated the other to the doctor. I didn't have a chance to have dinner before our visit as I was delayed at work. And then it dawned on me that you probably hadn't either since you're here waiting on me. Antoine reached into the bag and pulled out two trays. So I stopped at the little deli on the corner, and they told me you're fond of their finger sandwich platter. And once I saw it, I realized I like it too, so here we are. That was very kind of you, Mr. Krevsky, the doctor began as he took a seat. He was indeed hungry, but unsure what kind of precedent they were setting, as this was Mr. Krevsky's first appointment. But I should advise you that fraternization is often detrimental to the therapy process. A shared meal is often considered a bonding event between people, and interpersonal bonds are quite contrary to the professional doctor and client relationship. Antoine smiled and placed a steaming carafe of coffee between them. I understand fully, Doctor, but let me assure you, after our meeting this evening, you will undoubtedly decide that I'm probably off my rocker. Which is okay, because I'm pretty sure I'm at least batshit crazy. But I need someone I can talk to who's bound by law and the doctor-patient privilege to keep my thoughts to themselves. The doctor sat up straighter in his chair at hearing this. What was he about to become privy to? No, Doc, Antoine laughed. Nothing illegal, and no plans to hurt anyone, nor have I hurt anyone. I do not intend to burden you with any wrongdoing. I just need someone I can trust to talk to. Very well, Mr. Krevsky, the doctor relaxed. In that case, let us agree that we may share this meal, and you can talk as you desire. But at the end of this meal, I shall make a determination whether or not to accept you as a client. In the event I do not, I assure you, your confidence will be kept in the strictest sense. Thank you, Doctor, Antoine said, and began to make a finger sandwich from his tray. He piled sliced cold cuts on a fresh-baked French bread, followed by loose-leaf lettuce and a slice of cheese. I think it would be best if I just got right to it. Please enjoy your meal as I lay it out for you. Antoine ate half the sandwich in a bite and set it down to pour himself a cup of coffee. He ate the other half of the sandwich, washed it down with coffee, and continued. I got to work 20 minutes before time to clock in as usual this morning. I went to the lockbox, grabbed my truck keys and logbook, and punched in on the clock. On my way out of the warehouse, I checked in with the foreman to let him know I was present, and I headed out to my truck with a stack of work orders he handed me. Pretty typical morning. I did my daily vehicle checks, looked through my work orders, and decided where I would get started. When I knew which I would do first, I took a picture of the work order and sent it to the foreman for his morning report. You see, he has to meet with the superintendent, the safety men, and the quality control inspectors each morning to let them know where we're working. That way, if they decide to do spot checks or need to assist us, they're informed where to find us. Accountability in disguise. Antoine was making his third sandwich now and layering the bread with cream cheese and butter before adding the meats and cheese. He seemed quite involved in the process and remained quiet for several moments. The doctor was enjoying the sandwiches and coffee as well. He was on his second cup of coffee, relishing the freshness. He had been sipping on an hours-old pot in his office when Mr. Krevsky arrived. Since it's getting on to winter now, the sun comes up just as I'm leaving the yard most mornings, unless it's really overcast. This morning, the sky is dark and the air is still. Then as the light begins to show to the east, a cold wind picks up from the west as if rushing to meet the sun in an attempt to warm up. I was actually chilled and had to put on a jacket while checking the oil on the truck. As the day progressed, I found myself working in the wind. Steady, strong wind that made conversations difficult and just sucked the life out of me. Being outside got frustrating when very strong gusts took my hat. The gusts would burst, then slow as I walked to my hat, and just as I reached for it, another gust. One would think it a matter of random choice, until it happened several times in a row. The wind was playing games with me, and it was pissing me off. The next time I got close, I dashed forward and stepped on it to make sure it would not blow away again. The wind did not gust this time, making my effort pointless. Retrieving my hat, I pushed it on a little tighter and returned to washing the equipment. The low water pressure at the site I was working added aggravation to the windy day, but the wind changing direction to prevent the water going where it was needed pissed me off even more. It was like Mother Nature was intentionally trying to anger me. He finished his coffee and poured another. Most people don't notice as I move about my day doing my job. I maintain air conditioning and heating for buildings in a large government complex. I cycle through each building and chiller plant every 6 months to clean filters, lubricate bearings, adjust tension on motor belts, and clean the equipment to keep it running smoothly. I'm the first in line of defense against equipment failures. I do preventive maintenance and report any findings of worn or misoperating equipment to the maintenance department for repair. Some of the systems are relatively simple, like household air conditioning, while others are large, complex chiller plants with cooling towers that are connected to multiple buildings, which each have air conditioning units. The chiller plants send frosty cold water to the air conditioning units, which are used to cool the air. These air conditioning units are located in mechanical rooms at the various buildings. There are also boilers in the mechanical rooms which send hot water to the air conditioning units in the winter for heating, as well as boilers that supply the hot water for people to use in sinks and showers. The water in the air conditioning units is moved by large pumps, and the air in mechanical rooms is kept fresh and cool by ventilation fans. All these components work together to keep building temperatures comfortable for people and provide clean, hot and cold running water. As I said, most people don't notice as I come and go, keeping them comfortable. This also extends to the other people I work with. Unless we're working on a very large project where we come together to complete it quickly without having the equipment shut down for too long, I sometimes go for days without ever seeing other people on my team after leaving the office for the day. I mean, I do get together with some of them at lunchtime when we meet someplace to grab a meal. But usually, I eat from my lunchbox in my truck while in the field. This gives me a lot of time to think and just look around at things while I eat and have my lunchtime smoke. On this particular day, I was in a basement mechanical room servicing several pumps. As I was working, a couple guys from the maintenance section came in to work on a boiler. I watched as they worked, but even though I was right out in the open and they had to walk right past me, you would have thought they didn't even see me. They went right by, ignoring my greeting and not even looking in my direction. I'm not the most sociable person by nature, so when I do make an effort to reach out to others, it bothers me to be treated as if I don't exist. It was like they could not see or hear me. I got to tell you, this bothered me for the rest of the day, and when I went to the shop to turn in my keys and clock out for the day, no one noticed or acknowledged me. There must have been 100 other guys in the warehouse at the time turning in their stuff, and not one acknowledged my presence. It was like I was invisible, and it was bothering me. So that evening, just a couple days ago, I was sitting on my back deck waiting for dinner to finish while I sipped at a nice hot coffee. Then as darkness fell, I'm looking at the moon, and it looks just like it did back in 1969 when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed there. Then I remember hearing and reading somewhere that Buzz Aldrin says the moon landing never happened. Did it happen? I don't know. I've been fed so much bullshit all my life that I don't know what to believe anymore. Taking the last bite from the plate, Antoine sat back with his coffee and lit a cigarette. As the smoke drifted in lazy clouds about his head, he began to speak once more. I feel disconnected from the world, like I'm floating around within a hive mind that all of the other minds are linked to, but I'm kinda outside the box. I want the same things other people want. I want to be acknowledged, accepted, and to understand that my contributions are valid. I don't feel that. I feel pretty much alone. Sometimes it feels like I look around the world around me and everybody else knows what's going on and just tells me enough to get me by and keep me from asking too many questions. You know, like I'm a mushroom. They keep me in the dark and feed me shit to keep me going. Other times, it feels like the world is a construct, being built just as I get to it. Sometimes I have to take a pause and close my eyes because it isn't all built yet, and I can't find what I'm looking for, but if I wait a minute, then it's there. Well, this stuff was really bothering me, and I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I needed to decompress and get my head together because all these thoughts spinning around was driving me nuts. So I checked the calendar and saw it was time for my annual vacation. I figured this is good timing and put in my request. The bosses approved it in record time and I was off to get my head clear. Instead of doing the usual thing and heading for some vacation spot on the beach or heading to a theme park, I decided to return to someplace familiar. A place where I always had positive feelings and could reset myself. Couldn't return to my parents' home for a visit because they've been gone for years, and the house in the city we moved to when I was younger is now some other family's home. But I could return to my early childhood hometown, the place where I learned to walk and run and just be a kid. Sure, there was no one I knew there anymore, and I couldn't even remember the house where I was born. But it was a very small town surrounded by forests where I could spend my days relaxing and becoming one with the world again. The ride up there was nice. The sky was blue with only a hint of wispy white clouds. The sun was shining, and best of all, there was no wind other than what my car created if I opened the windows. A perfectly mild fall day. When I rolled into town, it looked just like I remembered. It's almost what you would call the ideal western town. Buildings built close together with wood sidewalks under awnings at town center. A general store stood on the corner of the town square next to the sheriff's office. Across the street were several businesses and a cafe. Then at the end of Main Street, where the road tees off and rolls back around the outlying areas to the beginning of Main Street, stood the motel complex where I would be staying. I got myself checked in and unpacked what I brought. Not much really, just some clothes and a few favorite groceries to eat in the room and carry on hikes in the mountains. I spent the first evening packing my backpack and getting my gear ready for the next day. There is a creek which runs into town and then on down the mountain where it joins with a larger river at the foot of the mountains. I had crossed the bridge over the river near this juncture on my way to town. My plan was to hike the creek toward the source and explore the mountains where I used to play as a child. Back then, I followed the creek many times but always got distracted before I got to the source. This time, I was determined to see if it was fed by one large spring or was the result of many springs coming together. Kind of like finally solving a childhood mystery. Antoine fell silent for a few moments, making the doctor wonder if he was okay. He watched as the man lit another cigarette and took a deep drag. It seemed as though he was steeling his resolve to continue. When the silence continued, the doctor began to speak up when Antoine continued. "You know, Doc," he began, Some things are better left alone. He sat silent for a few more minutes, just smoking and watching the smoke. I was up with the sun and ready to head out the next morning. I took the time to go to the cafe and have breakfast to get the day started. While I was there, I noticed that no one else, except the waitress, even acknowledged my presence. This was not a tourist-type town, and I figured everyone would stop and stare at the stranger when I walked in the place. But no, they did not even look up. It was as if the bell over the door had not even rung when I entered. I pushed those thoughts away and enjoyed my breakfast. Everything was cooked perfectly the way I liked it, and even the coffee was good. He paused to crush out his smoke. The waitress was pleasant and attentive. She even talked to me a little. Small talk, but human interaction nonetheless. I left her a decent tip when I headed out. It was another glorious day, and once I stopped by my room to grab my pack, I was off into the woods. For the first time in a long time, I felt I had a sense of purpose. I was not just going through the motions like an automaton doing my work by rote. I was actively pursuing the answer to a very old question. As I walked along the creek, I occasionally looked into the still pools and saw fish. When I felt the need to stop and take a drink of water, I was entertained by a hatch of mayflies and the trout chasing them. The woods were full of life. Birds sang, squirrels chattered, and I saw at least one of each animal that lived in the woods during the day. Then as the morning wore on, I found myself coming to a cliff in the distance above the trees. Through the trees I saw the cliff, and as I drew closer, I saw that it extended to the left and right as far as I could see. I figured when I found a clearing in the trees on a small hilltop, I would be able to see the ends of the mountain, but no. From my vantage point, the cliff went on forever. Of course, I knew this was impossible, but I cannot deny the image I saw. I continued to follow the stream until it disappeared into a cave in that cliff. Luckily, the cave was very wide, and there was more than enough of a bank on either side of the stream to continue following. I went into the cave a little way until I found a nice boulder to sit on, where I could remove my pack and retrieve my flashlight. I also took advantage of the break to have a little snack of granola and sausage with my water. Funny thing is, I had not smoked a cigarette since the one between the cafe and motel after breakfast. He stopped to light another cigarette. As you see, I smoke quite a lot, and this was unusual. Even after the snack, I did not want to smoke. I put my backpack on, grabbed my flashlight, and kept following the stream. Then, just about the time I thought I would have to use the flashlight, I saw a light ahead of me, and the ground was lighting up only 15 or 20 feet away from my position. I turned and looked back. The light coming from the cave entrance looked exactly like the light ahead of me. It was as if I was at the center point of 2 points of light. Or better yet, it was as if I was standing before a mirror that reflected everything but myself. I already knew what was behind me. I did not know what lay ahead. So I pushed on after slipping the flashlight into a pouch on my pack. I'm still not sure what happened after that. Antoine sat forward and looked very seriously at the doctor. When I emerged from the cave at the new light source, it was the same as when I went into the cave. The water was now flowing away from me downhill, and I could have sworn this is where I entered the cave. Did I get turned around in the darkness and end up walking back the way I came instead of further on? I was not sure anymore. I turned around and hurriedly walked back into the cave and made sure I did not stop or look back this time. When I emerged on the other side, once again, it was the same. I know I didn't get turned around this time. I sat on the boulder near the entrance to get a drink and think for a while. It just did not make sense. Then I had an idea. I got into my pack and got out a piece of chalk. On the cave wall by the boulder, I drew an arrow pointing further into the cave. I was about to pass through again, and if I saw the arrow when I emerged, I would know I had somehow got turned around. With a renewed determination, I quickly marched into the cave and did not stop until I reached the other end. To my surprise, there was my arrow, pointing at the direction I had come from. Impossible, yet true. I was totally dumbfounded and could not figure out how this happened. Then I noticed the shadows were growing long and decided to return to the motel for the night. I would have dinner and get a good night's sleep before returning to figure this out tomorrow. It's not like I didn't have plenty of time. This was only day 2 of my 2-week vacation. I guess I'd been walking for about a half hour when I realized I no longer heard birds or squirrels. The evening was upon us, so I figured they were all just tucking in for the night. It did occur to me that the woods grow silent when there is a predator nearby, but I felt it was simply the coming of night and continued on. Antoine crushed out his cigarette and immediately lit another one. He noticed the doctor had begun to take notes while he was describing the cave and wondered what he might be thinking. It did not matter. He was paying the man to help him sort this out, and note-taking was normal for psychologists. The shadows continued to lengthen until they merged into one as dim light in the forest. I could still see easily enough, but darkness was quickly falling. I guess I was about halfway back to the motel when I began to notice shadows flitting among the trees. When I noticed, I would turn to look, but there would be nothing there. This happened several times, and I put it off to being tired and having had an unexplainable experience at the cave. I pushed on to reach the motel. I found the path leading to the road next to the motel easily enough and stepped from the forest. The first thing I noticed was the lack of street lights. Then I noticed there were no lights on at the motel down the road. I made my way there, and looking down Main Street into town, I was surprised to see there were no lights anywhere other than moonlight. With no man-made lights to reflect on the atmosphere, the stars were remarkably bright. So bright, in fact, that I saw a quantity of stars more than I ever have in my life. I wondered what happened to the power, but found myself so tired that I did not care at the moment. I could inquire in the morning if the power was not restored by then. Right now, I needed to eat a quick bite and rest. When I turned to go to my room, I noticed my car was not there. In fact, there were no cars in the parking lot at all. I turned and looked back down Main Street, only now realizing there were no vehicles of any type in town. Now I was concerned. Where the hell was my car? I headed for the motel office, only to find the door standing open and no one there. I yelled and rang the bell multiple times, but no one responded. What was going on? I looked back down the street into town. There was nobody moving there. It looked totally deserted. I found myself wondering what to do and realized I was exhausted. I needed to eat and sleep. I went to my room. The door was standing open, but my things were still laying where I left them. I went inside and closed the door, locking the deadbolt and chain behind me. It was dark, but I knew the layout of the room well enough to make it to the bathroom to relieve myself. At least that much felt right, and I smiled at the shiver which ran down my neck. The toilet refused to flush when I tried. I reached over to turn the water on in the sink, but there was no water. Town water probably relied on pumps, and without power, well, no water. But the tank should have been full before the power went out, right? Then I remembered the door was open, and figured whoever left it open must have used the toilet after the power went out. Returning to the room, I felt around to find my flashlight in the pack. I flipped the switch, but it refused to turn on. Great, dead batteries. I found the spare batteries and installed them. Same result, dead as well. Good thing I had not needed that in the cave. Resigning myself to the darkness, I felt around in my pack until I found a water bottle and a pouch of beef stew. I settled back on the bed and quietly ate my dinner. When I was done, I placed the empty containers on the nightstand and immediately fell asleep. I had not even taken off my boots. It became apparent as I slept that I was having a hard time with the feeling of being isolated. I dreamt I woke to a world where there were no others and not even any animals. I was running through the city streets looking for someone, anyone, but there was no one. I woke with a start from the dream as a loud noise found me. I swear it sounded like a car door slamming. I got up from the bed and looked out the window, but there was still nothing in the parking lot. Nothing was moving outside. Not even the wind. I lay back down and tried to go back to sleep. I needed to make it to morning light when I could figure out what was going on. My mind was running a multitude of scenarios, among which was some danger here that resulted in everyone being evacuated while I was in the hills. I was sleeping hard when a loud noise woke me again. This time, my motel room door was slammed open and several shadows moved in and surrounded me. They were shaped like people carrying weapons but had no form, just silhouettes moving in the dark. I was startled. I jumped up from the bed and grabbed my pack, moving into a corner. A couple of them moved toward me as if to grab me, and I bolted for the door. I was running for my life. As I ran from the motel, I could now see shadows all around me. What were they? What was going on? I did not know what to do, so I ran. I had to get away from there. He paused to catch his breath and calm himself. It felt like he was reliving the experience all over again. Looking at the doctor, he saw the man had stopped writing and was just observing him. Was that amusement he saw under the still facade? As I moved away from town, my mind began to clear and I realized I was running along the banks of the stream back toward the cave. The sky was starting to lighten with the coming of dawn, and I could no longer see the stars. I found myself happy to be returning to the cave. All this had started after I left the cave. By the time I saw the cave, I had slowed to a brisk walk, and the relief I felt at seeing the entrance was overwhelming. Although, I'm not sure why. I stopped outside the cave to catch my breath and watch the sun peek over the eastern horizon. A shaft of sunlight lit the cave and I followed it in. I did not look for the arrow I drew on the rock wall, nor did I stop to rest on the boulder. I plunged headlong in, following the light until I saw the light at the far end and ran to it. The sunlight was streaming into the cave ahead of me, and I saw the arrow on the wall pointing toward me once again. I knew by my arrow that I was going in the right direction. When I stepped from the cave, I was immediately greeted with the sounds of the forest. Once again the birds were singing, and I could hear squirrels chattering. "I cannot explain it, Doc," Antoine said. "I never turned around in the cave." I went in and kept going, and both times it took me to a different place. I'm convinced that the place I returned to the cave from was a different place. When I made my way back to the motel, everything was just as I had left it the morning before. My car was there were other cars in the parking lot, and along the streets of town. I went to my still locked motel room, packed my things, and threw them in the car. I only paused long enough to light a cigarette before getting in and driving back here. I called for this appointment as soon as I got back into town, but as you see, it took a bit for me to be seen. I pretty much locked myself in my apartment playing video games until my vacation was over. Then I went back to work. Antoine sat back and relaxed, taking a drag from his cigarette. "So tell me, Doc," he said, looking the man in the eye. "Am I off my rocker? Can you help me sort it out?" The doctor cleared his throat and sat forward. "Mr. Kresge," he began and interlocked his fingers, "I believe you've suffered a traumatic experience brought on by feelings of isolation and the subsequent depression. As such, yes, I think I can help you. And yes, I will accept you as a patient." Antoine breathed a sigh of relief. He might be crazy, but at least he found someone who was willing to listen and at least try to help him sort it out. For now, I want you to go home and relax, the doctor said. If you find yourself thinking about what happened in the woods, write it down so you may bring it next time. If you start to feel anxious or overwhelmed, by all means, call my office. If I'm not available to speak with you, I will return your call as soon as possible. Thank you, Doctor. Antoine smiled for the first time in a long time. It helps to know you believe me. Whether your experience was real or imagined, I believe you experienced it, and together we will sort it out, the doctor said, getting up from his chair. Now, it is past time for me to be getting home. My wife will wonder what kept me, and it's not good to worry her. My secretary will message you tomorrow with the new appointment data, and you can submit your insurance information. The doctor led Antoine to the door and saw him out. After closing and bolting his office door, he walked over to the window as he got his cell phone out of his pocket. He hit the speed dial as he watched Antoine get in his car and drive away into the night. Yes, this is Dr. Kane, he spoke quietly into the phone. Yes, I just met with Mr. Krevsky and confirmed he was the one who escaped from the containment team in the data field. He's heading in the direction of his home now, so let's make sure the design parameters of the construct are in place before he arrives. Also, there seems to be a breach in the perimeter containment. If you access his location history and isolate the town where he disappeared and reappeared from the construct, you will find a cave. The cave is the breach. In the meantime, let's adjust his proximity alerts upward in order to facilitate more engagement of NPCs, as he's demonstrating extreme signs of isolation anxiety. I also think it might be time to introduce several more subjects into this construct with whom he may interact. His demonstrated need for companionship indicates he would benefit from a close interpersonal relationship with a female companion. I'm forwarding a copy of his post-construct breach interview, and I think you will find it enlightening. He has expressed that he was aware of the containment team as shadows within the data field. That is all. Thank you for spending your time with me. Tell me what you think in the comments, and I'll be sure to join the conversation. That's all for now, but I'll be back again soon with another story, just for you. Until then, sleep well.